They used to get a laugh. I don't know if it's a laugh.
Sorry.
Be a new joke.
Or you could not make one.
Okay. There we go. So we're actually finishing up tonight some of the content in this book, Winsome Conviction, using the content to talk about how to have productive conversations about hard things. So we're not trying to answer the questions about the hard things, but we're trying to look at how can we better talk about difficult things, especially within a Christian community. So how do we talk as Christians about things that are often divisive without dividing? So disagreeing without dividing. So I'm sharing content from 2 chapters this week. Again, we're not hitting everything in the book, but I don't know, maybe some of the stuff that at least feels memorable or practical. Okay, so we're going to look at some guidelines for hard conversations. Many of these come from chapter 10, and then 1 or 2 from chapter 12. So their first principle, fences make better playgrounds. You might remember at one point, the authors of this book used the image of fences in a little different way here. They talked about looking for fences as a way of trying to preserve a relationship while also acknowledging the differences that people might have. So like they gave the example of a group in a church that had a particular interest in ministering to a different demographic. And so rather than dividing, the church all agreed enthusiastically to do a church plant. And that was a way of preserving the relationship while at the same time honoring the differences. And so they called that fences. They're using fences here in a different sense. So they cite this interesting study that looked at playgrounds that are surrounded by a fence, and they compared those to playgrounds that are not surrounded by fences. And so in the playgrounds without fences, they found that children tended to huddle around the teacher. So these are school kids, that the kids acted like they were feeling unsafe, and much of the space in the playground just was never used by the kids. They just sort of moved around like, when kids do when they're playing soccer when they're really young. It's just that mob moving around. So they never spread out, and much of the playground was left unexplored. But in the playgrounds that had fences that went, all the way around them, it was just the opposite. The kids would move away from the teacher. They'd explore and experience all the different areas of the playground and have fun and get creative and things like that. And so what they write is that we have discovered that the same is true for convictions. So we've been talking in these 4 weeks about convictions or confessional beliefs being some of the most fundamental things that we believe and that we might get into disagreements with people about. So they suggest, in order to have freedom to explore and express differing Christian convictions, we need to have the confidence that our defining confessional beliefs are being protected. So, in other words, what they're proposing is that when you have a church or a group of Christian people, if everybody has a good sense of the fence, like these are our boundaries, and they might be very general in nature, but we have confidence that they're going to be preserved, that they're not going to change. Then the rest of the ground, the rest of the space is available for creative thinking and differences and exploration and investigation. And the fence actually provides a certain level of safety. So what do you think about that image? they're trying to give us an image that might influence the way that we go about hard conversations. Do you find that helpful or not?
So what are you saying? That the fence is your parameter for the hard conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think essentially the fence would be saying, you know what, no matter how much you and I disagree, we're probably not going to disagree about this. So it's finding those very foundational kinds of beliefs that create a little bit of common ground for disagreement to occur without dividing.
I mean, I guess that makes sense, and especially when you think about it from a psychological perspective, right? So if we all have the same fundamental belief, we're gonna agree to disagree no matter what. But I mean, a hard conversation is always gonna be a hard conversation. It will take time to lead up to that point. So maybe it's like planting the seed and then leading to it.
Okay, good. Can everybody think about an example from your own life or experience where maybe some disagreements were productive and existed in a Christian community or a church or a family because everyone had a sense that, okay, these are the things that are probably not going to change, and we feel good about that, and so we can wrestle around about these other things.
I struggle with the image of fences because sometimes fences are in the wrong place.
Yeah, right. Yeah, sure. Sometimes you have to move the fence.
Yeah, it
Right.
has to be moved because, I mean, in our tradition, we always knew that there were probably outer boundaries, but it was just safer to have a boundary within that boundary so you don't go too far out, and that really creates a lot of baggage, and when the gospel just says, it's wide and deep and high, and we wanted to make it small and narrow and confined and controllable.
Yeah.
And we use that as a means of judging others and excluding others and that sort of thing. And thankfully, many of us are getting out of that and seeing a wider God defined space, not something of our own making.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. You can't box God into what we think or what our human thought thinks of it, because God is a spirit, is not all the things that we define in our culture that it's supposed to be.
Right. I, of course, I wasn't here for this, but you might think about this own church's journey as it relates to gender inclusivity. And so at one time, and this is still the case in many congregations, there would be a fence around the issue of gender roles, for lack of a better term. But then this church went through a long, difficult process of saying, well, that we've actually not understood that right, and we now that we understand that better, we're gonna change that part of the fence. I think what these authors would say is, in part, that was made possible because there were other elements of the fence that didn't get moved. Like nobody was saying, well, we no longer believe in the Bible. The Bible is just this ancient document that doesn't matter anymore, so we can do whatever we want. In that case, that'd be saying, let's just get rid of the fence. But instead, I mean, not being here again, but my sense is that there was a sense that, oh no, we still very much respect Scripture. It's just as we explore this issue from a different perspective, we realize that Scripture is actually saying something different than what we thought it had for years. So there's still some poles in the ground. There's still some slats on the fence that provided some amount of safety for a really difficult conversation. At least a conversation that many might find difficult. I don't know. It was terribly difficult here.
It was, making a change like that is very difficult because there's a lot of, emotional
Yes.
triggers and conditioning that we all, have.
Right.
You don't want to do something that's going to offend anybody. You don't want to do anything that's going to upset people, but we're also people of the scriptures, or so we say. And once we understood that we had put a fence there where God had taken away, that's where we had to say, no, this must change. Because, in that example of gender inclusion for everybody, we realized that the Bible had been saying all along, you are all sons of God.
Mm-hmm.
And then that scripture just goes through, and just in case you don't get it, because you won't, slave, free, Jew, Greek, male, and female, you are all sons. And once we kind of got past our traditional thinking and saw what was really there, the fence had to go.
Yes, Annie.
I'm sort of thinking of the fence for Stanford as us. So if I have to have a hard conversation at Stanford with someone or with a group of someone's, there is a fence of others that I know support me. And I also know that that fence supports the others of whom I am speaking to. And I think having a difficult conversation one-on-one can be different than having a conversation within, say, a family. This is a family. We are a family within a family setting. So I think of having a difficult conversation with a client versus with my siblings. I think what's very comforting and very supportive for us as a church family is that we have that knowledge. We have that through consistent years of practice with one another and experience with one another. So our fence allows for us, I believe, to be very vulnerable and be very truthful. So, and I personally believe that that's a lot of the reason of the success of our church in all the multifaceted ways. A very small church can be very greatly successful.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you, Annie. So there's a relational component to this that sort of this image sort of needs. In some ways, Annie, you could say that the other people are sticks in the mud.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't say that.
I think one takeaway from this, maybe more practical takeaway from this, might be, when we engage in hard conversations, one thing that can be helpful to do is to say, okay, what we're not talking about here is we're not talking about these parts of the fence over here. These are going to stay in place. We're not talking about that. We're just talking about this part right here. And sometimes that can alleviate people's fear, right?
Yeah.
That, oh gosh, we're about to give up on everything. Well, no, these things are still in place. We're just gonna talk about that. Here are some of the things that I would say after the last year and a half here. These would be my impressions of part of the fence here, part of the very, very broad statements about, but in general, these things remain, and we can have some really difficult conversations inside of these fences. So what matters most is loving God and neighbor with the full self, physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, heart, soul, mind, strength. Jesus' birth, life, death, and resurrection are the unique way to that love. Our growth in this love comes through the Spirit's work of formation in us and our work of spiritual disciplines, including things that might be listed below here. We cultivate a community of extravagant welcome and full participation, inclusive of gender, culture, class, race, ethnicity, sexuality. We foster a gracious culture of rebirth and second chances, mirrored after the ministry of Christ, enacted most fully by baptism into Christ. We pursue justice for those who are marginalized. We pursue mercy for those who are under-resourced. We worship corporately in ways that are ecumenical, communal, genuine, invite service, reflect diversity, and ground us in Christ and the story of Scripture. We listen to Scripture in ways of textual, communal, ecumenical, theological, open disagreement, and that welcome truths of science, scholarship, and the arts. And we foster an environment of open and honest conversation, pressing not for uniformity, but love. But I'd say from my perspective, those are at least parts of the fence here. And, some of the things that are pretty solidly dug into the ground. And that really provides some safety for us to have some challenging conversations. Yes, I see a ghost hand. It might be John's. Can't hear you, John.
If you're saying anything, we can't hear you. Maybe he's just
John, you're-
waving.
There we go.
There we
Oh,
go.
there.
Yeah.
I'm just reminded of a fence that I encountered when I was a small kid. It was the fence around the Little League baseball field in our hometown. And it wasn't just a fence, there were ads, there were boards hung on the fence that represented things that were available in our community. And so when I think of our fence and the things that you just listed, it would probably be helpful if everybody were more aware of those tenets of our belief, just as those signs on the Billy Dunn field made it pretty clear who was the bank, who was the drugstore, who, where was the laundromat, et cetera. And now it's not a fence, it's community that you're surrounded by, and a community that believes in something.
Yeah.
That provides safety, even when you're addressing hard things.
Nice. That's a good image, John. Thank you. Yeah.
I just wanted to say I like our fence. I like the fences at Stanford.
Yeah.
That's a church I'd be a part of.
Mhm.
I like that.
Me too.
We're thinking about staying.
No, it's been a year. Only a
Now
year
that
and
the
a half,
18-month
right?
probation period is coming to an end.
I think it might be important every once in a while to just be able to say, is this part of our fence?
Right.
There are times when I feel the need to ask those kinds of questions, but I think that might be a good thing to be able to ask those questions.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let me hit some of these others here. So again, these are guidelines for hard conversations. This is a repetition of things that have been stated in different ways over the last 4 weeks. Differing convictions are a feature, not a bug. So they're using a software image here, and like when I switched over from PC to Mac, it's a whole different operating system, the OS operating system. And it takes quite a while for people like me to learn it. And sometimes when you're learning a new operating system, there may be something in there that really irritates you, and you think, man, that's a bug. Somebody made a mistake here. That's an error in the code.
They need to get rid of that.
Yeah, they need to get rid of that. It needs to be fixed. And the authors of the book are saying, for some of us, that's how we feel about disagreements, that anytime disagreement happens in a Christian community, we look at that and we say, well, that's a bug. That doesn't belong here. That needs to be fixed. That's a coding problem. But instead, maybe the better way to look at it is that it's a feature. We just don't really understand how to use it correctly. And it's a feature of the operating system. In other words, you can't have the operating system of Christianity without some disagreements taking place. And if we accept it as a feature, then that allows us to have some curiosity about it. I wonder why we're disagreeing about this. And it can be an opportunity to learn and even be playful with it, as long as we're not hurting people. So I think that that image, they've said the same thing in different ways, but this image might be helpful, memorable.
It's all about expectations. When you use a different program or operating system, you're expecting it to be like the one that you're most familiar with.
Yeah.
And you have to like release that. Growing up, I hated cats because they weren't dogs.
Yeah, right.
And they don't come up to you and, lick you and happy to see you. Cats can just, take you or leave you, and they'd rather leave you. But when I started experiencing cats as cats, I like cats.
Okay.
Right.
That's
Because I
good.
stopped expecting it to be something that it wasn't.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. That's helpful. Number 3. So, I hope some of these will stick in your memory. Be a chimp, not a rhino. Be a chimp, not. So next time you come and complain to me, about the sermon, I'll just say, hey, you gotta be a chimp, not a rhino. And I'm not an animal expert, so I didn't check this out, but this is what the authors say. Rhinos are short-sighted. They struggle to discern between a human and a tree, 50 feet away. They see something. Is it a tree or a human? So if they don't recognize it, they ran it. It's a so let's go on it. But chimps, when they see something they don't recognize, they investigate. They poke, they prod, they try it on. And so the authors say when we're in hard conversations, maybe we should be more like chimps and less like rhinos. Don't just automatically ram it, but investigate it, poke it and prod it. And I have definitely seen that in the Christian community, that when something that feels emotionally weighty for somebody, racism or some element tied to worship, it's just they go from 0 to 60 and ram at you, rather than saying, hey, I feel like we probably see this differently. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that. Why is that? Resounding agreement.
No, sounds good.
No, I think that's a great one. We've certainly seen that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had that, Eddie, of people, like families come in and the minute a woman got up, this has been a while ago, but they got up and left, and
Mhm.
Eddie would chase them out to the parking lot and say, was there something you'd like to talk about? Or, is everything okay? And one family I remember so well had 4 little girls. And we thought, what an awful message that sent to those 4 little girls, They were traveling and they could have just tried it out, one
Yeah.
Sunday to see what it was like. And that wouldn't necessarily mean they agreed with it, but they could have tried it out instead of popping up and making a big deal about getting out of there real fast.
Right.
That was just because it was woman.
Yes.
Mr. Rhino, wait,
Fences.
Mr. Rhino.
Fences.
I don't think
I didn't know that was a thing.
Blinders and fences.
You didn't know that was a thing.
Not
it is.
until I started coming here. I didn't know. It was
Oh,
a thing.
okay.
I had no idea.
Well, just
Well, that's good.
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 I grew up in church my whole life.
Don't,
I didn't know.
don't, yeah.
Yeah.
We're good.
Some backgrounds are different than others.
Yes.
But some things are harder.
Yeah.
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 Oh, I've had some wonderful conversations in the parking lot.
Number 4, I need to alter, alter my convictions. So what the authors suggest here is that too often when it comes to even what they call confessional beliefs, what we've envisioned as the fence, too often what we try to do is alter someone else's convictions. And we feel like that's our goal is to alter, ARALTER, the other person's convictions. And obviously sometimes, especially around issues of justice and injustice, if we're going to give a voice to those who are marginalized, there's obviously some push that we bring into conversations. But they suggest a healthy perspective can be that my primary goal is to alter, ALTAR, my convictions, to place my convictions on the altar, to dedicate them to Christ. That these, Jesus, I give these to you. These are part of my way of understanding life as I live it for you. And it becomes part of our ongoing relationship with Christ rather than our ongoing project to change people's minds. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I like that it immediately puts Christ in the conversation. It's not me and this other person having real different opinions. It's like, I just like the idea that we grab Christ in the middle of the thing. I like that.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't work out, it's his fault.
It's Jesus' fault. Yeah.
Oh, but it's also having faith in allowing God to move throughout that situation.
Yeah.
By
Yeah.
us, it's by what we know God can do through our faith, right?
Right.
Yeah. That's really, it takes a lot of weight off us if we can trust that, okay, the Spirit of God dwells in this person. God's present. Christ is present in this conversation. I'm gonna let them do the heavy lifting here. I don't have to change my conviction, but I can trust that they're going to do the heavy lifting in this conversation.
It's happened a lot here at this congregation, because, a Church of Christ can mean a lot of different things, and, no two congregations are the same. And, people that have had, tradition of one cup or no kitchen, whatever. And when they stay, that's exactly what they do. They alter their convictions. They give that up. They sacrifice them and entrust that to the process. And they just come out, so much more enriched, because we're a tradition of rules and boundaries. And studying the Bible here and history and all of that will help a person from this tradition to just let go a lot of stuff that we held so dear, and sometimes we held that higher than what Scripture says, thinking that we're acting according to Scripture.
And so something you said made me think that this perspective can help us when we know it may be time for our own convictions to change. That I may be better able to change my convictions if I understand that this is really between me and Jesus. This is not between me and this other person. And if I sense that Jesus is calling for a change in my convictions, that's a little easier for me to stomach, rather than, oh, good grief, I gotta do this for Kathy. Okay, number 5, I think this is a helpful image here. Make your church an art gallery, not a county fair. So at a county fair, people enter their goods, their pies, their quilts, their leather work, their bowl, and then all of these goods are judged and they're awarded, and you get to walk around and go, they got the blue prize, they got the honorable mention, they got the second prize. And ultimately, the county fair is a big competition, and there are winners and losers. But in an art gallery, things are displayed simply to be seen and admired, and people can talk about them, they can debate them. I see this, I see that. I think they were trying to do this. No, they were trying to do this. But there really aren't ribbons and competitions. So they say, what if our convictions were more like this? What if our convictions were something that we display? We don't hide them. We display them. Others can see them, and then they can admire them and say, yeah, that's me too. They can debate them, but it's all not a competition. There's no one handing out the blue ribbons to the best conviction and the honorable mention to the terrible convictions. What do you think about that image? Okay.
I
Yes, Julie?
I was gonna say, I mean, I like it. I think that, you know, it's that, I mean, on our own convictions even, I think one of the things I really appreciated about some of the first conversations we had is that you don't realize how biased they are and you know, because generally speaking, I think we think our convictions are right or we wouldn't hold them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice to just know that it is just a piece in art. It's just part of this tapestry of who we are based on
Mm,
a bunch of different things that we, you know, some of it's history. A lot of us have very similar histories in the church, particularly as far as being in a Church of Christ and what that means. But it's formed us and it's just piece of a tapestry, I'll say.
yeah, good. That's a helpful image. Yeah. Okay, 6, watch for unattended baggage. So the authors of the book, and again, these two are sort of communication, conflict resolution experts from a faith-based perspective. So they talk about the elephant in the room. You know, I think most of us understand that sometimes you get into conversation and there's an elephant in the room. There's something that everyone's really aware of, but just nobody wants to talk about. And of course, at some point you have to talk about it because it's there and everybody knows it. Unattended baggage, they say, is something that not everyone sees, not everyone's really aware of it, but it's still something that's going to impact the conversation. So one of the examples they give is that you might be in a hard conversation about an issue, you know, abortion, gun rights, the divinity of Christ. And at some point in that conversation, the other person becomes very quiet. And they say, what's happened there is there's some unattended baggage that's happened. You know, maybe their energy's run out and they can't engage in this anymore. Maybe they're feeling like you're attacking them. And so this is a defensive posture. Maybe they're afraid they can't say what they really need to say. They're nursing a grudge. They're afraid of conflict. So they call that unattended baggage. Obviously, in a one-on-one setting, it'd be hard to miss that. If you're in a group, though, you know, sometimes somebody's been engaged and then they just sort of sit back and you know, it takes some self-awareness to say, oh gosh, we haven't heard from Sandy in a while. Hey, Sandy, what's going on?
Getting married.
She has some baggage.
Shock.
Okay, number 7, achieve disagreement. So what's the goal? What's the goal in these hard conversations? They say, and this is counterintuitive, the goal is to achieve disagreement. So they say there's a difference between achieving a misunderstanding and achieving a disagreement. So until you are able to state the position of the other person in a way that makes them say, well, yes, that is what I believe, then you've only reached misunderstanding. So achieving a disagreement comes when both sides can clearly and accurately state both the beliefs of each other and how those beliefs make them feel. And that's the goal. So the goal isn't always achieve an agreement, but you've done some really good work if you can achieve a disagreement. Do you feel like that happens very often?
Elaborate on what you mean.
When you're in conversations that seem, you know, that they're difficult, challenging, talking about hard issues, do you feel like the other person generally gets to a point where they really understand what you believe in and how that makes you feel.
Don't you think that often you're so busy telling your side, they're not really listening to what they're saying? So I think a lot of times you don't really hear. Well, I'm not one to get in many disagreements, but I know how that works. And I think people just are so, into their belief. It's hard to listen to the other person sometimes, or at least to understand enough to be able to say, oh, this is what you believe, right? I think that would be very helpful to people to know they're being heard,
Yeah. Annie?
I think what sometimes has to be understood is that hard conversations aren't necessarily one and done. I mean, when they're hard, they need perhaps to be a series of conversations. There may only be a certain amount of vulnerability or a certain amount of ability to listen to the other side and be okay with what you're hearing.
Mhm.
You need to marinate on that a little bit, perhaps, as does the other. And then you get to the next series, and then you get to the next, page in the book and whatever. So hard conversations, part of the difficulty is the fact that they may last a lot longer. They may go a lot deeper. They may be a lot less predictable.
Yeah.
So
that's
I
good.
I think when the disagreement can come quickly, then it sort of, for me, I would say it would tell me that my state of openness at this time in my life to what I'm hearing from the other side. And if it can't, all the amount of forcing or pretending or trying, it may just be, hey, listen, that's all you can drink in at the moment. Sorry, buddy, Annie, you need to wait until you're ready to take the next step. And that's not going to come in a day. It's just like, with a client who has to change a certain fitness parameter. Sometimes it may come quickly and sometimes it may take a really long time. But the end goal, I love this, that the end goal is disagreement. Because I think that's an awareness. You're saying, I understand that you and I are not in the same place, and we're really cool about being in the same place about discussing that. And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. So you can have unity and achieve disagreement, right? Because there's mutual understanding and a sense of being heard by the other person.
Yeah. But inherently in hard is, that messiness, that unpredictability, that, oh gosh, I wanted it to go this way and it went exactly the other way. And now I gotta, retrace my steps from that and figure out what to say the next time. If you're really into it, you're gonna get ready for the next time, and hopefully so the other person. So, but that's what it takes.
Yeah.
For that.
Julie?
Yeah, I was gonna say part of the problem sometimes is, these are core convictions, right? And you feel deeply about them. And I find a lot of times I've gotten into arguments with people who don't have as much invested as I do in these core convictions. And they're just kind of messing with you.
Yeah.
And I have it, that's really hard for me because, again, some of this is, when it's core, it's a lot harder to give up, and just see it as a postulate and something that, to argue.
Yeah, I think that's why the authors, add that second part, that good disagreement comes when we not only can articulate what they believe, but also how those beliefs make them feel. Because it can be very weighty for you. And until that other person can really articulate that, it's hard to have a productive conversation. Okay, we're gonna close then with just a little bit of content here from chapter 11, chapter they call conviction mapping. So again, just some additional equipping conversations. So number one, clarify your convictions. Clarify your convictions. In other words, when we get into a hard conversation, it can be helpful for you to have a very clear understanding of what are we talking about here. What conviction of mine seems to be at stake here. So they give an example of a church where there's a disagreement about the level of what we might call charismatic activity in a small group that's meeting. And so they give these 4 statements here as, you know, potential convictions that can be involved in this disagreement. So at the most general, I believe every Christian should experience the fullness of the Holy Spirit. And so in this disagreement about tongue speaking in a small group that's meeting in this church, you know, maybe one person who's very much for that could say, well, you're saying you don't want people to have the fullness of the Holy Spirit, right?
Yeah.
And the other person might say, well, no, that's I think I share that conviction. I believe that every Christian should experience the fullness of the Holy Spirit. I think what you and I are disagreeing about is something else. So like another example, I believe every Christian can speak in tongues if they want to. That's a slightly different conviction than the first one. I believe every Christian must speak in tongues if they want to experience the fullness of the Spirit. That's a slightly different conviction. I believe our church's small groups should have regular times of speaking in tongues so people can experience the fullness of the Holy Spirit, which is a very different conviction, right?
Right.
So, you know, when the hard conversation came up, then people needed to clarify, okay, what are we disagreeing about here? Clarify your convictions. Number 2, understand your personal history. Obviously, this is work that often has to take place outside of the actual conversation. But once you have a pretty clear idea of what your conviction is that you feel is at stake in this conversation, it can be helpful to understand a little bit more about why you believe that. So 3 questions that they suggest reflecting on. When did you first start to feel this way? When did you first remember having this conviction? Because you probably weren't born with it. At some point, you got to a point in your life where this really mattered to you. So when was that? What defining events, relationships, or life experiences crystallized your thinking in this area? And then what emotions surface when you think about this issue? So this is just for you at this point, not even for the other person. It's just, you know, I need to have a little better understanding of what my conviction is that's at stake here, and why that conviction exists. What led to that in my own life? And then number 3, the language they use is thicken your convictions. So it's important to be able to place our convictions in a narrative rather than just a rule, a reason, or a Bible verse. So they suggest try narrating, you know, even just to yourself, but even in a conversation, narrate your convictions by starting this way. Here's what I think about this. You know, that's different than saying, well, here's what I believe.
Right.
But can I share what I think about this? And that begins to create some more opportunities for investigation in the conversation. And then third, relating to thickening your convictions, they say, take some time to trace what they call the spectrum of conviction. And we looked at this in the first week. You might remember there was a chart that went from the left to the right and started with confessional beliefs, you know, the most general core convictions that you have, and then moral mandates that flow out of that, core values that flow out of that, guidelines for conduct that flow out of that. So once you identify what your conviction is and why you have that conviction, then spend some time sort of tracing out what are the implications of that conviction in your own thinking. And then 4, they encourage perspective taking. So if you had to argue for the opposite side in a disagreement, what's the best case that you could make? And how might you even strengthen the arguments that the other person is giving? And what changes to the other person's perspective might make it more acceptable to you, rather than just an outright, they just need to change everything they're thinking. Is there some small change that you could accept and say, oh yeah, I think I could live with that in this conversation. But in other words, trying to stand in their shoes and say, well, let me try on their argument here for a minute, see if I fully understand it really is what they're getting at here. I think I've got one more slide. I think that ends the content from that book. Yeah, that at least as far as we're going to cover over these 4 weeks. So here's what we're going to do starting on August 10th. So that's 2 weeks from tonight. Dale Pauls is going to take 4 weeks, 10, 17, 24, and 31, and lead us in an investigation of what it means to love God with all your mind. So we're taking 4 or 5 weeks at a pop here throughout this year to look at different elements of loving God with your heart, your soul, mind, strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. So Dale's going to explore what it means to love God with all your mind. And we're gonna take a break next Wednesday night. So we won't meet next Wednesday night, and then we'll jump into 4 weeks of loving God with your mind. Does that sound okay? Yeah. Anybody want to argue about that?
How strong are your convictions about that?
That's right. Well, I have an emotional reaction to it.
Okay. Well, you're just immature.
Somebody had to tell you,
Yeah.
girl.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for being with us online tonight. Thanks everybody for being here in person.
Good to see you.
Fading fast.
Take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Good night.
Night.
Right. You feel it's like 1 a.m. or something?
Yeah, I'm feeling kind of weird.